So today we are going to be talking with Snow Nemeth, who is an energy healer practitioner. And if I'm correct, she studied under the Four Winds Shamanic organization. Is that correct?
Yes.
And is knowledgeable in craniosacral therapy and has kind of created evolved a unique healing modality that she uses on her clients. And so we're here to learn more about that.
Thank you for that setup. That was lovely. And I'm very honored to be here. So very grateful for the opportunity to share. I do not have a cultivated elevator pitch, so I will spend a few minutes going into my background so that it sets the stage for how what I do now is really just a blend of decades of adding tools to the bag and exploration and discovery in such a wide range of healing techniques. Some may sound unrelated, but they've become this wonderful blend to draw from. So again, you have said a few of the places I've studied. Way back, I had some exposure in veterinary medicine as a technician assistant, and then went on to doing body work, medical massage and such for humans, and found that I thought it was just a detour to what I was really ambitious for, but it took on a life of its own because I had such an affinity, which I had been doing actually hands-on stuff since I was a child. And it came very naturally. So I have added to my bag everything from, teaching anatomy and physiology and very medically based, hands-on, studied with osteopaths and do cranial sacral therapy and certified as a lymphedema therapist. And it's okay if nobody knows what any of those are. Visceral manipulation, and just a wonderful exploration in how can we assist the body to do its own healing, and doing quite a bit of teaching. Energy work was always in there, but I kept it kind of quiet because the comfort zone several decades ago was left brain, stay in the sciences. But I came in wired. I came in engineered for energetics and intuition and being able to hear, feel, see other cues that people or animals may be giving off. And it has turned out to be quite a wonderful blessing in being able to assess. And what I really refer to myself as is a good tracker. I track energy and get stimulus in a variety of forms. And so the background that I was just mentioning has progressed to incorporating everything from therapeutic touch and Reiki, angelic Reiki, studying shamanism through the Four Winds organization with a medical anthropologist, but also sitting in the Andes with the shaman and practicing very traditional earth medicine. And it's such a beautiful thing because when I landed at that school, I discovered, wow, it's my Hogwarts. These people are doing stuff I do that I don't tell people I do, and they have names for it. So that was very fun and very exciting and felt natural, and then became taken under the guidance and under the wing of a gentleman and I do have some Native American ancestry. So a Native American, he didn't like to be called a medicine man, but here on the North American continent, and was exposed to some additional teachings and incredibly loving guidance. So I've just been blessed to cross paths with amazing physicians, healers, etc., and been guided to add, I guess curiosity has been my friend there, adding tools. And eventually I am much like the reluctant little shaman that came out of the closet and started to let people know, yes, I see things. I see internally, symbolic sight, hear, kinesthetic. Often my body becomes an assessment tool for what's going on in another's. You know, I'll feel things, I'll get sensations. So what I do is highly intuitively guided, and it also pulls on the resource of a lot of study over the decades. And I'm never quite sure how a session's going to go, because my job is to set the space, the sacred space, know that there is an enormous amount of beautiful assistance available to all of us, in whatever form that we name it. I have often referred to the help I receive that I know works with me as, say, you know, the unseen, the council of elders, or lately I've been calling them my celestial beloveds. So some people may have their own, be completely unfamiliar, never been exposed to relying on that. But if they have any sort of faith in their life or connection to nature, they probably are experiencing that, whether they know it or not. And also, when someone is questioning, how does this work? How does it go on? Because instead of seeing people in person anymore, I do everything remote. I work over the phone. I work with people. I work with animals. So the beauty of the fact that there is an effect with animals, it's not a placebo effect. It's really a matter of quantum physics. So once a connection is established, there is that entanglement, that feeling of that vibrational signature. And it doesn't matter if someone is 5 miles away or 5,000 miles away. It works equally well. And I really love it because I get to rely more heavily on the direct information that comes internally, or intuitive guidance, as opposed to just what I can see with my physical eyes or touch with my hands. And it has taught me a lot. It has honed my skills. I used to do both remote and in person, but as we all know, 2020 changed a lot of things for all of us. And so when we were unable to see people in person in that year, and really couldn't for quite some time, then it just directed me into doing everything remote. And it's become a real blessing, actually. And that is some of what I do. Trying to think if I've missed something that may be helpful. Background is in some herbalism, yoga, teacher training, medical massage. I mentioned the veterinary. Also assisting in a process of death and dying. So I became a minister as well, because I've had people, in fact, can I say it, Galen? A dear friend asked, I've had several friends come to me and ask me to marry them or to facilitate for graveside services or in assisting to crossover. So it really does, there's not one title, but maybe in the old world teachings, I would have been the medicine woman of the village, because I just go where there's a need. And it's been an incredible journey. Not always easy, but a lot of wonderful discovery. And my clients are the best teachers. They amaze me by the miracles they create, and their growth and their healing, and witnessing it is often extraordinary, really extraordinary. So any questions?
Yeah, can I ask one question? You mentioned quantum physics. Now, I've heard the word quantum entanglement. Is that what you're referring to? Because this is distant healing, right? And you're just...
Yes. Yes.
And so what is it? I'm trying to understand. Quantum entanglement
From a science standpoint, quantum entanglement is a property within quantum physics. Do you want to actually know the scientific definition?
No, I know quantum physics, I studied it, but quantum entanglement, I don't understand.
Well, no, but that's a property within quantum physics. That's what I'm asking. Do you want the definition of that?
Yeah, I never heard the word before, quantum entanglement.
No, quantum entanglement is part of it, right? So you know what quarks and muons
In quantum
and that,
physics, yeah,
right?
never,
Yeah. So the concept between quantum entanglement, right? So it's Schrodinger's box,
Mhm.
right? And the cat, you don't really know what's happening because of the until you observe it, right?
Right.
And part of that has to do with because the quantum particles, any two quantum particles affect each other, but distance is irrelevant, right? So any two objects, it exists, one particle exists everywhere at the same time. It just doesn't become solid, or it doesn't become known to us in the material realm until it's observed. So thus quantum entanglement means the particle exists here and there at the same time.
Right.
Got that? So they use that. They've been using it. If you've been checking online, they've been for a while now, for a couple of years, they've actually managed to actually produce transportation of a few of one or two molecules. They've been able to transport them from one location to another because through quantum entanglement.
So Snow, how does I know it's a big, deep question because we use quantum entanglement with things like Rife machines and remote spooky 2 things that we've been working with before. How do you see quantum entanglement working from your perspective in your practice?
Well, first of all, thank you so much, Daryl. You explained it in a way I'm
like a scientist.
Out of touch.
Well, I am a
it.
scientist, so there you go.
Yay for the scientists. So how do I see that working? Well, I just, if I'm on the phone with a client who's in Texas and we're assessing something going on with her horse, I must be, through the connection we have, here and there simultaneously, because I will begin to see or feel into the horse's body or sense, the emotions. Sometimes it gets very specific if there's something physically going on. And so how do I see that working? How else would I be able to do that in theory at such a great distance if I'm not physically there with them? So I see it as intention and consciousness. So a part of me is there, or is calling on it, or is tracking on it. It can feel like I'm there. I mean, sometimes I can describe the environment or the landscape, or I can see, a strain pattern in a hawk, or a chip in a bone, or something. So I must be bilocating and just not taking my body with me. Now, whether that's entirely accurate, I don't know. No one has, I jokingly refer to myself as my own experiment, but nobody has studied me to see if that's what I'm doing.
And so, there's a lot of books and knowledge and stuff coming out about that people have this that all people have this capability, and you have tuned into it. What does a typical session with you look like if, say, I were to say, hey, okay, I have things going on physically, mentally, whatever, and I would like to have a session with you? What does the session typically look like for you?
So typically we'll schedule, find our sweet spot for scheduling, coordinating schedule, get on the phone. Now, if it's for you, we would I would ask you, we would set this as a sacred space, as a container that is protected and calling on for your benefit, your healing, and find out what your intention is, what you would like to achieve from the session. It can be really different for everyone. I mean, it may be physical, it may be emotional, it may be wishing to clear limiting belief. That part is what you would, share with me. And then for me, depending on an initial conversation as to what you're receptive to, honoring your belief system so that I'm in rapport with you as far as the languaging that I may use, then I'll usually do my best to describe as I start to receive input, what's going on. It may be about finding the right questions, but I start to I call it tracking. Invite information to come in that will help to facilitate you achieving your goal in wellness. And it can come in any number. I may hear words, I may kinesthetically feel sensations, I may in my inner vision see something and start to share with you and ask questions, and it can have a literal physiological impact. It may be something that reverberates more in your emotions or your emotional body. But I try to look at the energetics, both your etheric, your light body being, as well as the physiological, or perhaps, finding the right questions and the guidance to unravel something that's more emotionally based.
So would you normally treat more health related issues, or could it be I'm losing money in my business and I need a little bit of help in growing my business, those kind of things?
Well, I would say it could be almost anything, because sometimes I've been surprised when my clients refer someone to me and I haven't had a conversation yet with the person. We've just set up an appointment via text. And I've been taken by surprise a few times, that because my work initially began with more health and well-being as a focal point. But it has really expanded. I mean, I've had people contact me, and this may be a little out there for some people, but it becomes a little bit more like mediumship. They're interested in contacting the consciousness of someone who's passed. I have several clients who basically try to vet. I have some who really want to tune in if they're in alignment on making financial decisions. I have several top performing world champion quarter horse showing people, and they want to know how to get more aligned so their performance, mind, body, spirit, the right questions on how to get there. It's a bit more like coaching, but it incorporates the energetics and how to get them aligned so that they have the edge on performing. Does that answer your question?
Yes. Yeah. You also mentioned that you have these celestial beings who help you. Is it in all the issues, or only certain times that you call upon them and they show up, or it just happens automatically? Sometimes they show up, sometimes don't.
Well, that's a great question. I operate off of the request that they be there each and every time that I am offering a service. So that, and even way back when I was doing body work, my prayer was to the divine to say, let my hands be yours and yours be mine. And now with the evolution and the sensing of more of that assistance coming in, I'm always very respectfully saying, that which comes in at a particular level of consciousness and higher is welcome for the highest good of all, and specifically on behalf of a client's request. And so I set the tone, set the space, and my assumption is that they're there, and I'm often cognizant of it. It's not like I see you in the room. I know some people have very colorful descriptions of, say, guides and angels. For me, it's just a sensing and a faith, and offering myself up to basically be the laser pointer, so that it's a team effort. And it feels like, although I resisted for a pretty good segment of my life, I came in engineered to be a catalyst and to be able to play in the non-physical realms and be able to distill down the information in a way that makes it more accessible and practical for people who have not yet, say, like exercising a muscle, have not developed that in themselves. And I believe we are all evolving there, evolving into being more multidimensional and developing things like telepathy or inner vision.
Have you noticed over in your practice, have you noticed people being more receptive to what you do? Is there been a shift in how people take, your healing practice?
Absolutely. Pardon me a second, I have to close the door. I definitely have. Like I may have mentioned earlier, initially I was a little reluctant to reveal how much the intuitive aspect was woven into what I did. I hid behind the science. And I really notice that there's a carryover. Sometimes, especially when I'm first working with someone, I very much want to respect and honor whatever their beliefs and boundaries are. So I will ask, and increasingly, especially in recent years, it's amazing. Even if people say, it wasn't how I was raised, or I haven't, they're just, it's like flowers opening. The receptivity and the curiosity is really accelerating out there. People are more and more open, and often people that may surprise you.
So I'm just curious, like some of you talked about, I'm curious about some of the transformations that you have seen in your clients, whether, 4-legged or 2.
Wow.
Some of the transformations that you've witnessed, some of the things that you have done, and some of the whether energetically healing or just whatever, some of those kind of like neat little, wow, I was a part of that kind of moments where you saw some pretty great transformations. I was wondering if you could share some of those with us.
Oh, I'd love to. Sometimes they wow me, and I think, wow, I got to be in the room for that, and they gave me a check. And some clients that I've had for quite some time, and I especially the older I get, I feel like a proud auntie, where you see people bloom and really move into their fullness. So off the top of my head, last June, I had a new client referral with a cat who was having seizures, and they couldn't seem to abate them or regulate them. And fortunately, as we dropped in and I started to see and feel and experience what was going on with him, which was very multidimensional, it wasn't limited to physical only. There was a massive energetic component. His person was very receptive, and I wasn't sure at first. She's like, you can say anything, just run with it. And we went through this amazing process that felt like it incorporated his incarnation now, but also previous to that cat coming in this body. So whether people say past lives, or I refer to them as alternate incarnations. And we really did a big healing piece on him. He has not had a seizure since then.
Wow.
Yeah. And she's even told the veterinarian, And the one she has now, she's like, oh, okay, let's just go with it. They don't know what to do about it, but that's fine. He has other challenges we're still working on. I tend to be tenacious. I like to think, oh, one and done. Let's get it in the first session, but that doesn't always happen. Let's see. Yesterday, as a matter of fact, there was a session that just wowed me. New client, and it was for a dog. And this woman has a background in healing. So she was just really following I was getting a lot of very specific anatomy, things that were going on in the energetic. And this was a rescue dog that I think was kind of giving up because its sister dog had passed. It had eating issues, had lots of challenges. And the dog's hypervigilant. It had come from an abusive environment. She said it was the first time during our time working together that the dog hadn't run to every single noise of a car passing by. It stayed in one place. It fell asleep. It was the first time in 3 years she'd seen the dog have REM sleep, where they dream and they twitch.
Oh, yeah.
And the light was coming back in her eyes. Now, the woman who has the dog is a nurse, and she also practices Chinese medicine. And she refers to it as Shin, so life force and vitality, because I started getting impressions before we were even on the phone. I mean, it was whatever was needed for this being was coming through even before we got on the phone. And so I started to share with her, and I thought, I don't know how she's going to take this. And I had, several paragraphs of notes, and she said, everything you're saying resonates. So there were things that I described, and she didn't tell me very much. And this dog was just, I guess ripe for it. We really had to call back her spirit, her essence, and almost like infuse it back into her body. So I will find out how she's doing, but in the 75 minutes that we were together, she was already physically, visibly manifesting profound changes. And is that always the case? Not necessarily, but more often than not, and since this is what I do, when people ask, if they're highly skeptical, I said, well, I wouldn't be around and my phone wouldn't be, ringing if something wasn't working for someone. So,
can I offer a testimonial?
Oh, please.
Because I'm the human.
Yay.
I've been seeing Snow on and off for about 20 years, and mostly physical until the last couple of years. And so a couple of years, no, it was last year, I sprained my sacroiliac joint exercising, and I could hardly walk. I couldn't even put my socks on. It was really bad. And I'd seen a couple of people to fix it, and they couldn't do nothing.
And you saw them in person?
Yes, and I saw them in person, right? So then I'm like, I gotta call Snow. So I call Snow, and I'm laying on the bed, and with a Snow, a session is like you're in a half meditation, having a conversation. Sometimes I see what she's seeing, and sometimes she's just having this conversation, and I'm just trying to keep my mind blank. So what she ended up seeing was some stuff with my ex-husband, and I don't know what all else, but by the time the session was over, I got up off the bed and pain went on and never came back, ever. So that was a real dramatic experience that I had with her. And my husband had one fairly similarly dramatic a couple of weeks ago, or a month or so ago. And and all it was an energy block that Snow she sort of just saw in his spine. And from that moment on, he was bad. He could hardly walk either. And from that moment on, it just started getting better after that. So that's what it's like as a human.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing.
Thank
So
you.
Snow, so
Great.
in a session like this, what would be going on in your mind? Is it possible for you to describe us? I mean, I'm just trying to get a feeling of, or you don't really know, or you just
Well,
things
I do.
happen.
I try to keep my mind out of it, the thinking space. And like any therapy, finding the right questions or tracking, again, I call it tracking, it's like trying to follow the breadcrumbs to get to the core, not just the surface or the symptom. And so it's searching, seeking, asking, feeling, and then being receptive to the information that comes in and trusting it. So it's been a long journey of also trusting what's there. Sometimes people will not be aware enough of what's going on inside themselves to be able to validate it. However, I find in recent years that the clients who do come to me and find me, because it's all referral, they are incredible to work with. They are ready, they're ripe. And even if they don't fully understand the process, it has, it's been pretty incredible. So as far as what am I thinking, there's still that very human part of me that's always thinking, please, have them discover the results or have them, meet their well-being and their healing, so that they can feel better, whatever feel better means to them, whether it's the physical restriction or an emotional, sometimes it's about their relationships that they call. So
if there was a block, you discover a blockage, just like Galen just said, there was a blockage. So you would feel the blockage and then you'll do something so the blockage is gone or
yes,
it dissipates. Yes. And you'll know right away, right? Or maybe after a little while that there is a blockage in the spine or something, right?
Sometimes it's right away. Sometimes I need a little bit of context. Sometimes there may be something else that has to be relieved or shifted first. So I really, it's like a dance. And my job is actually to follow, not to lead. My job is to listen and follow and be the best facilitator and keep myself out of the way as much as possible. So it really comes down to almost being in a different brainwave state so that I'm not, Snow's mind and thoughts aren't necessarily inhibiting the process.
So how do you keep yourself from taking on any of that energy or blockages or anything from your clients? Because I know that there's a danger of that. And
yes, there is. And boy, has that been a really important lesson and journey for me, being very empathic. That was difficult for me in the beginning. And now how do I do that? I actually limit how much I do because it can be extraordinarily exhausting. So think about a plane taking off and all the energy that takes to go up to a different atmosphere. And if there's turbulence or finding that sweet spot in order to get where you need to go, there's a lot of energy and you're playing in a different environment. And then landing can sometimes the energy is so profound in a session that it feels wonderful. But getting off the phone or coming down from that, and I'll be really exhausted or I'll realize, oh, okay, I need to clear. For me, I set the intention about the space. I check myself afterwards. I go outside a lot and just be outside with, feet on the ground in nature so that I'm recentering. But it is something I have to be cognizant of, because it can be very exhausting to be that hyper focused for, say, 3-4 hours a day. So it's not like a day where, sometimes it can be more exhausting to do 3 or 4 hours of this type of work than doing 7 hours or 8 hours of manual body work. So I do have to check myself often. I'll feel like, wow, okay, is there some residual energy that I didn't make sure I cleared afterwards? And it gets better as I go. And then it's about educating and about having boundaries. There are times when I'm not always going to be accessible, because where our consciousness goes, we go. So if I'm answering a text or I'm doing it at particular hours, and then I'll realize that I'm kind of off in the ethers. So sometimes people I'm close to, they'll ask me, well, what do you think about this? I mean, are you asking me my thoughts? Are you asking me to drop in and track and go in the ethers? So I've developed this little phrase, and I say, no, my Wi-Fi is off right now. I'm not playing out in the Ethernet. I need my Wi-Fi to be off, so I'm not, because if you go traveling, you might, like catch a cold, or you might pick up something energetically, right? So it's always a learning curve for me, how to manage myself. And the better I can do that, and the challenges that come in my life, then I figure it's like, if I had to learn the hard way, I'm a better trail guide. I can turn around to the person behind me and say, you make your own choices, but if I can help make it easier for you, that's what I'm here for.
So do you ever do tracking for yourself? Like, if you're ill, you're like, where did I pick this up, and go on and do that? Okay.
Sometimes it happens spontaneously, but yes, I do. So I had set the intention a couple of months ago to do some clearing about around a pretty significant surgery I had, where there's a lot of scar tissue inside my abdominal pelvic cavity. And there was an evening where I laid down and I was starting to feel all these incredibly painful sensations. I thought, okay, just breathe through it. I must be releasing. Okay, let's facilitate that. And then my mind jumped in. What if it's appendicitis? Like, what if it's this? I was kind of checking. I'm like, okay, if it's truly that I'm removing the energetics and unwinding scar tissue, because it was getting pretty painful, then in theory, I should be able to sit up, shift my focus and my consciousness, and regulate it, or have it subside. I didn't want to stop the process, but that little nagging mind that said, oh, what if it's appendicitis? What if it's an ovarian cyst? Blah, blah. And so I sat up, had some water, started to breathe, tracking on myself, palpating. Okay, I can make it subside. Then it's probably fine. But it's something I just need to surrender to. Obviously, there was something I needed to be willing to release and breathe through the tissue memory of it. So I tried to lay back down and let it go, but I think I had capped the peak of it.
So do you find that, in your experience, that is illness more tied to physical or energetic for you? Is it equal, or is there just more of an energetic component to it, or is it,
It's both and. And I from my that's a tough one. I lean more towards energetic first. Although it reminds me, though, of a client from some years ago, if I could share another story, who was, I would say, early 60s, and constant chronic back pain had wrapped a Corvette around a car when he was 18, broke his back. Like they almost said he would lose his legs, you know, had a brother die in the accident. I mean, it was like really bad. And he had just managed it with every way possible for years. And we were pretty diligent and worked on getting his back physically to release. I mean, the shape of his sacrum changed, and it was amazing for him, because he'd spent so many years like letting go of the emotional component. When we got those physical releases, he was so much better. He didn't really need to process the emotional aspect, but the residual was still in a pattern from where it had, in essence, solidified in his body. And after that, probably TMI, but he was sending me messages like, I golfed all week and I didn't take a leave, and my wife and I were getting intimate. I'm like, okay, that's enough. That's it. And we didn't have to do a lot of energetic or emotional unwinding, because the years had kind of already done that for him. So sometimes that is the case, but more often than not, I find that there's a energetic emotional component to whatever's manifesting in us physically.
Maybe we can see anybody else in the audience. As Louise and I, we have been asking questions. Maybe somebody else in the audience is waiting to ask something. So please unmute yourself and go ahead. Otherwise, we will continue. So, okay, well, there's nobody else asking. So another question, like, you know, when you have radionics or Rife machines, you're using machines to transmit whatever you transmit or gather whatever you can, but you don't use any machine, right?
No, I recently got one of the spooky machines, and I love learning and playing with it. We can do that, you know, with our consciousness. It's certainly easier to do it, but sometimes it comes in session where if someone's releasing something, you know, whether it be sadness or grief or the angst over a former relationship, and that gets released and reframed, we will call in, you know, ask what is your desired. When you extract something, it's good to change the affinity. So call in an emotional quality. Sometimes I will get, you know, downloads of, oh, this homeopathic feels good, or this essence feels good, or maybe this herbal. And during the session, we'll just start to call in the vibration of that as their medicine, you know, and they may follow up and go get that actually. Oftentimes though, if there's something being released, say grief out of the lungs, it's a good idea to call in the frequency or the vibration of what they want to replace it with. And they may describe it as joy or lightness of being, or they just want to feel playful again, you know? So those are all frequencies. Those are all energy and motion, emotion.
So you would set up the machine with certain frequencies at that point, or not?
No,
really?
when I'm working, it's all it's me and, you know, the universe. Although because my clients, some of them are now know that I have one of those machines, I'm actually starting to get some of them contact me and say, hey, I you know, I have a cold, or I just tested positive for COVID. And I'm like, hey, there's frequencies for that. So, you know, I'm happy to toss you in the remote and let that run for them. So.
Okay.
So it kind of saves that energy from you having to facilitate the frequency to them in that way. Do you have any practical tips for us on ways that we can tap into this aspect of ourselves to be able to tap into clearing or healing, or, you know, those type of things to ward off negative energy or any of that type of thing? I don't know if you have any practical tips that we might be able to use on a daily basis.
Probably a whole lot, depending on the time. So there's kind of two questions in that. I mean, there are very, very simple ritualistic ceremony little things that one can do as practices to implement. Now, you also had in your question about tuning into self more. And so if you have people who meditate, you know, have practices like that, breath practices, deepening their own listening to their body and their emotions and being willing. Sometimes even if we recognize we have resistance, just the first step is being willing to say, yeah, I might not want to hear the answer, but I'm willing to sit here and feel this sadness and until it really reveals to me, you know, something I need to know in order to shift my perception. Journaling, being in nature, if there is something that helps one ground, and in all the practices and things that I have been schooled in, at first I was very uncomfortable with some of the more rituals, but I've come to absolutely adore them, whatever they are, whether it's a fire ceremony, whether it's a practice of, you know, someone may just have their own version of cleansing. Trying to think if there's just, let's see. You can do everything from a simple, if it aligns with someone, you know, writing what they want to release and burning it in a candle or a fire, or creating a little tiny space in their home that they can make as an altar and make an offering so that it can be altered. Think about the universe, that you're not sending it off to someone else, but it's compost. And it can be turned into something beautiful. You know, one person's refuse can be turned into, it's just energy. So making an altar, fire ceremonies, going out and really getting grounded with the earth and being willing to relinquish the things that we carry. And even if we don't know what they are, start with asking or talking to one's body. When I used to do more hands-on body work, people say, how'd you know where to go? How did you know that this was tied to that? And I said, you know what? Your body will tattletale on you because it stores and remembers everything. Everything. And it's an amazing record keeper. So if someone's not sure, and it can be scary, say they have a pain somewhere, to be very gentle and loving. And part of it is we judge ourselves so much. If you think about something that happened to you a long time ago, the consciousness of your younger self didn't know better. And often we're looking through the filter of now, with the wisdom of now, thinking, I have regret, I should have known better. But if your, 17-year-old self were standing in front of you, it would be so much easier to see her at that age and give her a hug and wipe her tears. You can impact yourself through time and space with lovingly reparenting yourself as well. You become this mystical parent. A friend of mine uses that term and I love it. To alter the consciousness of your own memories, your own traumas, and lay it down. Lay down the burdens. Allow the lightness to come into your body, and depending on your point of reference and faith, also calling in frequencies that serve you better. And whether that's calling in the light of Christ consciousness, or whatever one identifies as a source of unconditional love. For some people, they've never experienced, they don't have that sense of connecting to, say, a higher power, but maybe their grandmother or their dog was that source of unconditional love. So calling it in to be supported, and then supporting themselves, really loving themselves.
How about shamanic? I mean, you mentioned, so what's the difference between the shamanic techniques and the other ones that you practice? Any major difference? Because
So the shamanic techniques, what's interesting is nobody's really reinventing the wheel. So if you sit with the shaman in South America, they will talk to you about the energy centers and the rivers of light. Well, if you map them, they're the same as the acupuncture meridians in the East, or the nadis in India. You know, they're the same biological, even though our instrumentation is only beginning to catch up to show these things. So they may use different terminology, but quite frankly, there's a massive crossover. They're very similar, because if you're operating with energetics, the system is still the same. It's just the operator may have a different name for it or a slight twist on it. So for me, it's all become rather blended. I'm not attached any longer to a specific protocol. I think protocols are wonderful for creating foundations, and especially when we are at the level of being technicians. And then as we evolve, as we develop our trust, our faith, our skills, and we have amassed the knowledge of all the protocols, then it becomes wisdom when we can step into being artists in the healing, and trust that the body may show us and have a completely different sequence than what the protocol in the book says. So for me, it's really become a blend, and not, oh, in this moment, I'm practicing Reiki. In this moment, I'm going to switch over here and practice shamanism based in the Quechua tradition. It's kind of transcended it all, quite frankly. You know, I still recognize and step into when there are moments when something that's very specific that I can attribute to a cranial sacral technique, or lymphatic work. But it's really become an eclectic blend for me.
right. So really you are working, so you have the body, mind, and the spirit, right? So you're actually working at the spirit level, and the body also is sort of a spirit, right? It responds to you, it talks to you.
Yes.
It's all at the spiritual plane, right? You convert everything into a spiritual plane, and it just resonates.
Yes.
So if we wanted to, I know I put it out in the newsletter, but if someone wanted to get a hold of you to maybe set up a session, or where would they need to go?
So the most expedited way would be through phone number, and I will say I don't answer any calls if I don't recognize them. and obviously when I'm working, I cannot be attentive to a phone, because that time belongs to my clients and uninterrupted. The fastest way to set something up would be by text, and I happy to have you put the phone number in the newsletter. Do you want me to say it now, or?
Sure, please go ahead. So because it'll be in the recording then.
Okay, it's area code 916. The number is 708-0133. So 916-708-0133.
Okay.
And I know, Louise, you discovered this with my email. I wish that I was quicker at responding on that. It's just like all of us, we need it to order anything these days, and we get bombarded, you know.
Yes.
Like you get 100 or so emails a day, and several slip through the cracks. So I've stopped encouraging clients to contact me that way, because I know I miss things. The other is, if they look up on Facebook until my website's back up, they look at Expanding Divinity. I don't post much on there, but sending something via Facebook Messenger, if someone doesn't want to incur, you know, a text charge or phone call, to do that as well. That would be a good contact method. So. Oh, and if they want to mention sacred truths, then I'll make sure they get something special. I don't mean like in the session, but like I'll figure something out anyway. Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. That's great. Thank you.
Yeah. A little bonus on time or something, or a discount. So. Yeah.
Okay, sounds great. Does anybody else have any questions? John, Helen, Alice? And so, okay, so I think we're almost at the hour mark, but I wanted to say thank you to Snow for all of her expertise and for that. It was fascinating. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Oh my goodness, thank you. I'm very, very honored. Really great questions. Yeah, talking about myself is not usually the comfort zone for me. So, so thank you. You made it quite easy.
I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Thank you.